Thank you. I'm so happy to be here. There is a song that I grew up listening to. It's a Lyle Lovett song. My dad used to play it on his red guitar in the basement of the house where I grew up. And it's a song that is about a misunderstood community member. Everybody knows him, everybody loves him, but nobody gets him. And it goes something like, the waltzin' fool, he just might be crazy, 'cause the waltzin' fool, he keeps the moon in his car. And the waltzin' fool, he swears that it's running on waltzes and waltzes and waltzes. I loved that song. I loved that song. I felt like every time my dad sang it, I was reintroduced to this character. I could smell the whiskey on his breath, and I could hear his overshoes buckles clanking against each other. It was one of my first memories that I had as a young girl, falling in love with folk music and falling in love with the stories. I was a girl who grew up on the back roads of western North Dakota, right on the edge of the Badlands. My music was what was coming out of the 2 FM radio stations, one country, lots of Reba McEntire and Randy Travis, and one classic rock. And whatever my dad was playing on his tape player or coming out of his mouth and out of the sounds on his guitar. And my stories were the stories that my neighbors and my uncles and my aunts were telling around the coffee table and around our kitchen table after long days of working in the office or in the fields. And I fell in love with those people, and I fell in love with the stories that they told about the past and about the landscape. And I fell in love with music. And I wanted to write songs like Lyle Lovett wrote that brought people in and made them fall in love with the place and made them get to know people, made them fall in love with my people and my place the way I fell in love with the old waltzin' fool. And don't we all have dreams like that when we're 9 or 10? Before the world sort of taps us on the shoulder and tells us, well, okay, yeah, but you need things like insurance. You need to make some money, girl. You want to be a singer? Well, the only way you're going to make it is if you are famous someday. And I didn't want to be famous. I remember closing my eyes at night when I was just a kid and just praying to whoever was listening, like, please, I don't need to be Reba McEntire. I got the hair, but I just want my songs to be heard. You don't want to be famous is a hard one to explain to people when you're walking off the stage after a show. Maybe it's a flatbed trailer you're singing at a county fair, or maybe you're an opening act in a theater somewhere and they want to congratulate you and they say, you were so good. Why are you here in North Dakota? Why aren't you in Nashville? Why aren't you in LA? Why aren't you someplace bigger and better? What are you doing here? To be famous is what you should be. That should be your ultimate goal when you're an artist or a musician, shouldn't it? Go on American Idol. I thought so at one time. I recorded my first album then at 16 years old of original music. I recorded another one when I was in college, and then I hit the road on behalf of the music, touring up and down the Midwest, touring for an agency out of Nashville, and I sang for my supper a girl in her Chevy Lumina driving in toll booths and traffic lights and like 17-lane traffic. I grew up learning to drive on a stick shift on the back roads. I was so out of place. But I felt like all of a sudden I had this world open up to me where I could start a dialogue about this obscure place called North Dakota that nobody, not even in Wisconsin, had ever heard about. And yes, I was writing about the coulees and the cricks and the big blue sky and the dusty cowboy hats, and no, my accent wasn't Canadian, and yes, we have running water up here, and no, we don't drive around in covered wagons. Legitimate questions I was asked. And it was lovely, it was wonderful. I met a lot of great people. I was young, I had the time, but I was lonesome. And I was missing something because I had this little piece of my life that was me out on the road alone singing my songs about a place that I loved so much and about the people that I loved so much. But I wondered if it was worth it to give up all of my passions in the name of one passion. What was I doing it all for? Why was I so lonesome? What was I doing here? So I thought, well, some people do it. Maybe it's not for me. They've all been telling me to get a real job. Maybe I should do what they say. So I did. I finished my degree. I got married, and I got a real job. I worked in fundraising, and I worked 9 to 5, then 9 to 9, then all of my weekends, and all of my days were spent putting what I would put into my creativity into my job and my work as a professional person, because that's what I thought that I was supposed to be doing. And that's what they tell you to do when you go to school and you're from North Dakota. Get out of here, girl. Go do something bigger. Go find something better. And I just wondered at night, after all of the worries and work seep into your brain when you try to close your eyes to sleep. I wondered, can we really make a living and have a life? Can we really have a life and make a living? And I wondered what the 10-year-old version of me would think of me now, where I've given it up. I've given up the stories and I gave up the song, and I wasn't not happy. I just wasn't maybe doing what I wanted to be doing, the thing that I promised the 10-year-old girl I would do. Don't look back, dear. Don't turn away. And then one day we got kind of a word and an opportunity that my husband and I could move back to the ranch where I was raised. And I jumped at the opportunity. We loaded up my little car and his pickup with all of our hand-me-down furniture, our hand-me-down tables and couches and chairs and all the things you acquire as a young person, our 2 dogs and my boot collection, and we threw it all into this little house, tried to find places for it in this little house where my dad was raised, where we used to have Christmas dinners together, where we used to cram in all of my family in this tiny little house. And I wondered where we fit everybody and all that love and all those good memories, and I couldn't find a place to put my boots and my dresses. And then I looked out over the barnyard from the kitchen window where the sink was, and I was home. I was where I wanted to be, and I thought, now what? Their bank is hiring in town, but let's be honest, nobody wants me to handle their money. I could be a teacher, get my teaching degree, and teach music. And then one rainy night, after a hot August day, the rain poured down on the gumbo clay hills that we used to slide down as kids, and my husband and I, we ran to the top of it, just kind of wild and throwing off our shoes and looking up at the sky and thinking, thank God we're home, thank God we're here. We looked at one another and we slid on down. And then I wrote about it. I started writing about it. I gave myself permission to do the things that I loved to do when I was a kid, and I put it on this website just so maybe I would have a reason to get it out into the world, and it felt like it was just coming out of me, just pouring out of me again like it did when I was a little girl. I climbed to the top of those gumbo buttes. I picked wildflowers. I followed my husband and my dad around. I fixed fence. I took pictures. I gave myself permission to do what I loved. And I wrote about the things I was worried about, too. I wrote about starting a family. I wrote about, should I get a real job? I wrote about canning choke cherry jelly in my grandma's kitchen and how it was a complete and utter disaster, and you should never Google how to can choke cherry jelly. You should just call your neighbor. And then I started getting calls and emails and letters and messages from people from all over the world, not just my grandma who was reading my blog or my aunt in Omaha who really loved it, but people that I didn't know. There was thousands of hits. I wasn't doing it for hits. I was doing it to get it out of me. And they were saying, my story was their story. My grandma was their grandma. My home looked like their home, or my home looked like nothing they've ever seen before. And boy, wasn't it inspiring. And boy, isn't it interesting what's happening in North Dakota. And boy, thank you for sharing our stories with your stories with us, because isn't that what we all want as humans, is just to connect and find a way to be heard and find a way to find ourselves in other people's songs and other people's stories. And then I started thinking, well, maybe I had it right all along. Maybe this place needs stories more than ever. Maybe it's not Nashville that needs my stories. Maybe I need to be a storyteller here. Maybe every place needs a story. And maybe our stories are our only hope. And I'm not famous. I never will be famous, because they don't have gumbo hills in Nashville or LA. At least, I don't think so. But I think every place needs a storyteller. Every place needs an old waltzing fool. And maybe that's me. Maybe that's you. When I was a young girl, I dreamed of the water, engulfing these Midwestern plains. I'd be no longer landlocked, no longer grounded, no longer tied to this place. I'd climb to the hilltop and turn my face up to catch the late evening breeze. And the birds, they would call me to stretch my body out across their wings, and they'd sing, don't look back, dear, but don't turn away. You can't leave here, but you sure as hell can't stay. I had a fast horse, traded him for a fast car, and I put my heart where it was meant. But I think that horse had a piece of my soul left beneath his dark skin. And he'd sing, don't look back, dear, but don't turn away. You can't leave here, but you sure as hell can't stay. Don't look back, dear, but don't turn away. You can't leave here, but you sure as hell can't stay. No, no, no. Now there's too many ways out, too many to choose from, blacktop, gravel, dirt roads. But under these tires is a road that keeps moving on longer each mile from home, and it sings, don't look back, dear, but don't turn away. You can't leave here, but you sure as hell can't stay. Don't look back, dear, but don't turn away. You can't leave here, but you sure as hell can't stay. No, no, no. Now there's plenty of green grass between here and the oceans, and I want a piece of my own. I'm facing the skyline, but over my shoulder, something keeps calling me home.